So we'll move on to today. My ambition is to have the recording up on YouTube and the slides back out to you on the same day. So you can hold me to that tomorrow or next week and see if I actually get it. If I actually get it done. Again, as usual, no problem. Turn off the mics and stop me at any stage, and I'll be stopping as we go anyway, just to give us a chance to have a chat about the things that you see. So we are in session 3. I'm just going to go into slideshow. Okay, and great that most of you have stuck with us. It's really good to see you again today. So there was our welcome and intros, our recap, and we're going to start by where we left off last week and then move it on a bit. So last week, as we were just saying, we kind of left it at our conversation around power. And we did kind of make a judgment that where the very top, because we even looked at the education system and we said, most women, most teachers are women, but if you look at the top level, most principals are men. And we were looking at, even within government, mostly men, mostly settled people, mostly white people, mostly educated people, most privileged people. So what I wanted to ask you then is, if we look at power, and then if we look at the opposite of power, which is poverty, discrimination, inequality, where do we see poverty, discrimination, and inequality? In what types of communities do we see that? And are they evenly distributed? Let's go that in, Anne-Marie, and stop sharing. So I'm just going to put these questions in the chat. I wish Zoom had a function, or maybe one of you knows, where you could just keep a slide up at the corner so you could focus on the slide when you're discussing. I'm just going to put it for now. If there's anybody brainy enough to know how to do that, let me know.
I think it's a problem with the view. Like if you check the view, then there are different options, and then you can pick which one you feel comfortable with.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm not going to do that now because I'll figure that one out for next week. So the 2 questions I'm asking are, within communities, where do we see poverty, discrimination, and inequality? Hi, Anne-Marie, you're welcome. And are these things, are they evenly distributed? Do we see them everywhere? So where do we see poverty, discrimination, and inequality?
Can I answer?
Oh, please. Yeah, jump in. This is all about switching on the mics and jumping in.
Yeah, I think that you mostly see poverty and discrimination among people who are not in the power position, like minority groups, ethnic minorities, people from different gender identities, people who are from traveler Roma communities. You see it also, like we mentioned earlier, about women, about young people, people from different racial ethnicities, backgrounds. I would say it's not just about that. It's mostly about people who are not represented or who are not, whose voices are not being taken considerations by higher ups, so people who have the decision making or have the monopoly over resources or money.
Yep. As usual, very comprehensive answer there, Amina. Well done. Anybody else?
And also, I see poverty in places of conflict, war, or disasters, or but discrimination I see everywhere, like it could be in every field.
Yeah.
Whereas there is power, there is discrimination. It's always this.
Yeah, because I think that where there is power, there are always places where there isn't power. And that's where you find poverty and discrimination. Oh, Shin Grace has just come into the room.
I think, am I okay to speak? Yeah.
Oh,
I think
God.
Poverty in deprived areas not just in groups, like in, you know, lower income, lower class, if you like, people. It's very prominent.
So where do we get this notion then of deprived areas? What makes a deprived area?
I suppose reputation, where it is, community, like, you know, just say, for example, it could be like you find more resources like drug units, prisons, you know, so sort of in a place where people don't feel comfortable with other people. Does that make sense? So, you know, do you want to buy your £300,000 house facing a prison? Do you want a drugs unit beside you? Do you know what I mean? Do you want, I'm not just picking on drugs, but it's where the government, in a sense, are likely to put people that it's like, we'll put them in that corner and we'll, you know, leave them there. Am I right in saying it like that?
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There is no right and wrong anyway, but
and-
you're dead right.
yeah,
Like, as I said, we're from inner city Dublin, and even though I don't live in inner city Dublin, you've always seen, you know, and it sort of feeds down generations. So lack of education. It's only recently that, say, in the last 8 or 9 years, that there's actually a secondary school being put into the Dublin 1 area. Do you know what I mean? Like, to have no secondary schools in where there's a vast population, you know, so there's things like that, I would say, are deprived.
So the powerful people, the people in power, the people who have power to make change, are not putting schools into areas of high populations in deprived areas. But if you crossed the street and went up to, I'm not great now on the Dublin regions, but like Castleknock, for example.
Well, there would be two secondary schools up there, and there's you know, I could name 4 secondary schools within my area now. If you cross over to Dublin 2, and I'm saying Dublin 2, but you have the Loreto College, which is St. Stephen's Green. You have Westland Road, there's a college there, not a college, a secondary school. So only across the river, which it'd still be sort of classed, but it's not that deprived in our city,
Yeah.
you know?
it started when the government decided to cluster
Yes.
people based on the level of economic level or something like that. So it's like spots. So there is a spot for social welfare people, spot for even lower than this, spot for the people who can pay more. That make the country like divided. So when we came here, we would know, because we would ask, where is better to live? Where should I look for rent? And we were told from people who were living here before, avoid this area, avoid this area, and avoid this area. And it's because there's a lot of clustered flats or social houses or all of that. So it's they did it because of the clustering.
Yeah, and I think that housing thing Archie put in the chat there, I don't know, Archie, if you can say it yourself, but in the workplace and social services like housing is a really, really, it's a very good method of doing that clustering, because you can either afford to live there or you can afford to live here. So it's a tool that society uses to cluster people. And then choices are made whether or not to put in services within those clusters. So, you know, a cluster where housing is expensive usually has services, because within those communities are the powerful who make the decisions. So I think that housing and communities, and how communities are, because communities that sometimes they're actually made. And I think that it's an interesting way of looking at it, is through housing, how those clusters can be created, and then how decisions can be made about the investment of resources within those clusters. Anybody
Yeah.
else?
Yeah,
Joyce?
near like it's housing has an awful lot got to do with it. So they have built, I mean, for years, when we lived in the inner city, there was the tenements. They knocked down the tenements and they pushed everyone out to Dublin, well, 5, 7 areas, like further out, which at that time people thought was the country. But as Anne-Marie said, they didn't provide the schools, the adequate facilities for all these people. Like, it was just, there was houses,
Yeah,
Mm.
and then not the inner city tenements, and now look what they're after doing. They have to build
Yeah.
them back up in apartments.
yeah,
So it's like going, it's just like a vicious circle.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And in all of those transactions, somebody's making money somewhere. Like
Oh,
you may be sure of it. There was a block of flats. Do you guys know Charlemont in Dublin?
yeah.
Yeah. So there was a block of I think it was 4 or 5 flats in Charlemont. They're the old ones, the real old ones. And the sense of, I mean, no, some of the flats were absolutely beautiful, but they were neglected. So there was lots of issues going on with them. The land was owned by Dublin City Council. So what they did was they did a private, what you call those, the local authority made a deal with a private company. So the private company got the land, and what they did was they did build a block of apartments for the people who were living there, and the people all moved into the, not all of them, but most of them moved into the new block of apartments. But then in an area of land that used to have 4 or 5 low-rise block apartments is just transformed with these mega structures, loads of them. I mean, in a community that housed maybe 500 people, this is like a town now. There are shops, there are it's the headquarter of, I think it's not Google, Amazon. It's the headquarters
Amazon.
of Amazon in
Yeah.
Ireland.
This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
where my husband work.
Oh, that's where you were.
His
So you
office.
know Charlemont. Yes, I was
Exactly.
involved in the
It's the
not
new,
not
the
in the
new,
physical planning, but in the social planning around
yeah, it's
that project.
Dub 18, the new location.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's absolutely enormous. But for the people who lived there originally and who still live there, I mean, they love their new homes. The new homes are absolutely beautiful, but the sense of community is just so different. But within that transaction, the people there was a lot of money made in that transaction, and it didn't
Mm-hmm.
go to the people who lived there. It didn't go to them. Now there are other benefits, and there are other benefits, but I'm just trying to, I suppose, get at the sense of, people can yield power in lots of different ways, and housing is actually a critical one. And when money is going around, a lot of the time money is accumulating within a very small number of people. Archie, you just took off you just switched on. I don't always get to, you switched on your mic. Did you want to say something? No? Anybody else?
Yeah, I sort of agree with you, Ain. I think you've took the words right out of my mouth, because that's how this structural planning, it's a way to control people and to sort of segment them in a way that disempowers whilst empowering those who are already in power. It says a lot about the mindset of those who are in power. In a sense, it can be it can be likened to what happens in America, what they call redlining. So once you're stuck in a certain area, they can control you through deprivation of certain services. And so that area is zoned. The type of property that you live in will not exceed a certain value, and the type of properties that are in that area, even if you wanted to like sell your property and move elsewhere, you couldn't get as much money out of it as, say, a property that is in Malahide.
Mm.
I know, because I also live in Dublin. I know there are certain areas that Nira was talking about that you know not to go to, and even if you got there's a there's a dire crisis of accommodation in Ireland, but we still wouldn't go to certain areas, inner city Dublin areas, because of, you know, the social problems that
Mm.
that arise from there. But
Mm.
those social problems were in the first place caused by the sort of you know, spatial planning from those who were in power.
Yeah. Can I just ask then, is discrimination slightly different? Where do you see discrimination?
In areas or just overall?
It's
Like-
overall.
I don't think so, no. I do think, and I mean, like, Anne-Marie is my sister. Plus the fact we grew up in flats like Sinead, and it's sad to think that that's the perception that people get of the inner city. It is, because there's a lot of negativity on it. But there's an awful lot, and I know this is said about everywhere, there's an awful lot of good people live. And when different cultures move into these communities, I'd say 80%, yeah, acceptable. That they're accepted into these communities. So I think to a certain extent there is too much negativity on Dublin's inner city. Like, and I fully understand, oh yeah, oh come here, this thing happens, this thing. It just seems to be highlighted constantly in those areas. Whether it be unemployment, drugs, discrimination, violence. I do think it's high, like a few years ago, certain incidents that happened in Dublin City, and there was like drug overtaken. There was one particular incident that had happened, a high profile model, and she had taken, and she died. The following day, there was 2 incidents in Dublin city centre, but it didn't get, hers didn't get the negativity as that did. This is what happens there, this is this. No matter what, they both, the 3-4 people, they all took the one drug, they all same outcome. They all died from, but yeah, it was just focusing on that area and the bad things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this hype a few weeks ago of incidents that's happened in the inner city, and it was no-go areas, I don't go there. In my opinion, I don't believe that there's no-go areas in Dublin. It's like everything, you have to be careful no matter, and vigilant.
Yeah.
That's in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think what's really come through is the sense of community within the Dublin inner city has just been phenomenal. And I think so I think that yes, we often tend to focus on the negative, and certainly the media focuses on the negative. And I think again, what community development can do is start to change that narrative and can start focusing on the positive. When I'm talking about discrimination, you're dead right, Joyce. But also I think that, you know, discrimination is within every single community. Absolutely every single community. So it's not just, I think it is different to poverty, because you know, you can have groups that are discriminated against even within, well, with all communities. So I just think that we need, you know, we need to be mindful that discrimination can happen absolutely everywhere. Anybody want to jump in on that?
Yes,
Okay,
Spain
yeah.
here. And yeah, I agree with you. Discrimination does happen everywhere, and not only within the community, even in the workplace. Okay, and particularly in the, my husband was surprised, in the college, and then when a couple of years ago there was a case, the higher education, the management and come to the promotion area. So, the female lecturers will get less opportunity to be promoted. And for years, it's kind of like accepted. If you look at the management, most companies, the males and the head of the department always be this. And but at the same time, I think knowledge is power. And education certainly and play a very important role to enable people to know their rights. And certainly, in the college I'm working and now in Dundalk IT, and last 20 years, I've seen a lot of female colleagues has been promoted. But in the past, at the beginning, it's not they are not being promoted. It's not that many people would like to go for that roles. And it just, when there is a management, there is a higher opportunity there. And we talk to each other, and there weren't that many female colleagues who are interested to go for that role. But now I've seen these changes. So I think, it's a process. It's a process. In the past, it's not saying that, oh, I don't want to go for the RCD. It's kind of like being accepted that, okay, that's the male job. And widely, it's kind of like nobody saying that you cannot. But I think majority of us would just accept it. But now it's kind of been changed.
Mm.
Or I say, well, it doesn't have to be a male. And then if there is the case and you're not successful, and I think I've seen more colleagues who question that the reason of it, even from the management point of view, you can see that, and they are cautious about the gender balance. But that wasn't happen, that didn't happen in the past.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I think discrimination can be very silent. It can be invisible, and it can be internalized, and it can have a chilling effect. It can be so internalized that you wouldn't even dream of going for that job, because it can actually even stop you. So I think we just need to be very mindful that discrimination can be very, very invisible, and that people experience discrimination absolutely everywhere for different reasons. People experience discrimination. Because I better move on, or we're never going to get through what we need to do today. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to just I always find this. Can you see that? Okay. Am I sharing the screen? No. Okay, can you see that? Yeah. Okay. I've always loved some of the things that Nelson Mandela has said throughout his life, but I think that one of the things I would suggest to you is a lot of people think poverty is inevitable. They think that poverty exists because it exists. There's no reason for it. But poverty is not an accident. And Nelson Mandela says, like slavery and apartheid, it's man-made and can be removed by the actions of human beings. Sometimes we accept poverty. Sometimes we think it's inevitable. And if you look at the powerful within society, they would love us to think that poverty is inevitable. In fact, it was Michael McDowell said a couple of years ago that poverty is essential to motivating people to go out to work. Poverty is actually an essential part of society. But I'd like us to think about the fact that actually it's not essential, that it is deliberate and it's maintained deliberately. And like slavery and apartheid, it's not actually inevitable and it can be changed. So if we've done some of the thinking, if we've done some of the thinking around power, around inequality, around poverty, what now? Where do we go? Like what do we do with that type of thing? With that type of analysis? I won't go to that one yet. Where does that leave us as people who are, some go on?
Sorry,
Where,
I'm probably just asking, what is the question that you're asking? Sorry.
where do we go from here? So we've done some of the analysis. We're all involved in community development or community work in some way or another. What do we do? What's the next step?
What do we do as people, or what do we look for as the unity of Ireland? Like, who do we
Both.
go for? Both.
Both.
I suppose an ICON, the volunteer group I'd be involved in, we only had a meeting last night, and there's an aim, there's a goal. We've sat down and we've discussed, we've discussed different areas that we'd like to improve and what we've been working on within the community, but we want a solution and we want an end result. So it's like, how do I put it? It's like there's a 2025 to 2030 plan within the EU. So they basically want to sort the housing out, different education. So I think for the small groups that we're in, we need to have a plan. We need to be going forward with, so when do we need to have, and what resources do we need to get us to that? Am I understanding that?
You're
Right.
absolutely. But could you condense all of that, exactly what you said there, Anne-Marie, down to one word?
A goal.
A goal
Well, for
to
me,
do what?
To develop the community.
yeah, but to end, the poverty, the minority groups being, the racism. You're not always going to get rid of racism, no matter who you are, but that we have a more combined way of living, and that we, at the end of the day, I even said it last week, we all want to, come into this world, raise our children, have a good life, but there is those that want to ruin it, you'd say. But I would say we need a goal, and
You need a goal.
we need to be going forward,
Yeah.
like we're all doing within our certain groups that we're all in here now, but it's, seeing the bigger picture and how do we get to the bigger picture. And I suppose when you talk about discriminated areas, like we were saying, the inner city, and the first thing to start off with is, education and resources, because if you don't have the education, like I'm after being trying to say there, if you're coming from a family who, the mother and father didn't know how to read or write, left school early, and then got out to work. Okay, they might have a work ethic, but for us to move on and work, I've often heard friends of mine going, like you're saying, I wouldn't go for that job because I don't have the qualifications. So where if the education caught us at the right time, I won't say caught us, if we got more educated, the majority of people would feel confident to move on and go for a goal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I suppose what I'm trying to nudge you towards, because you're saying it in loads and loads of different ways, is the word change.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense to people? Is
I'll
there
write that
anybody
down.
is there anybody around the screen who is not in some way or another trying to make change?
Exactly.
No, well, I suppose
We're all here to make change.
we're all here to make change, and
Yeah.
even though we give out about the government, they are trying to make change. It's just how the process goes. Do you know what I mean? But like if you're part of an organization, you have an ideal to make a change. Do you know?
Yeah. And what do we mean by social change? I mean, you've described the process there very well. Anne-Marie, in terms of, you set a goal, you try and work back, you look at the resources that you need. But what do we mean by social change? What do we,
Can I say something here?
yes, please, yeah.
So yeah, just a small comment on what has been said earlier. I don't think it's enough to have education and to have a goal in order to actually reach, like equality and reduce discrimination, especially in terms of like when talking about economic, financial problems and poverty. I think people should be given equal chance in order to, like dive into the market. And if they are not being valued the same way as others, then it doesn't matter sometimes if they have the education or if they know how to do what they want to do, but if they are not treated the same, then that makes the world difference. And about social change, I think it's like a group or a community will in order to change things in particular policy or particular issue. For example, you need to really understand what, for example, certain group of women who are in this X community really want to do. Like if they want to acquire certain skill and they don't have the means to acquire that skill, or it's not available in where they live, then maybe it's better to open a space at a certain time that suits them in order to acquire that particular skill. And sometimes it's like the law prevents, for example, refugees or migrants from doing certain types of job like medicine or like other or teaching because of like certain limitations. Then maybe it's good to what they call it, like lobbying and trying to change that particular legislation in order to enable these people to be included in the society better.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, that's exactly it. It's about looking at what needs to be changed. So again, a lot of people around the screen will have been involved at one stage or another in some type of needs analysis or community profile. So we look at the communities that we live in or we work with, and we see where does change need to happen. And then we set in place a process to achieve social change. But the social change bit is really fundamental to community work. We're not in it to maintain the status quo. We're in it to make change. Can anybody give an example of where there's been positive change as far as they're concerned for their community?
The one time I saw positive change was when I'm a facilitator for anti-racism, and I work with a project that it's doing a training especially on the Islamophobia, anti-racism as well. And the moment I felt there is a change is when we were into the local county council's offices to give them training on racism and discrimination.
Yeah.
So I felt that a change happened, like,
You felt something, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Sorry for intervening so much. I just want to say one point here. So I haven't been here long in Ireland, so probably I don't know so much about the process, how these things developed, but I just know one thing that I remember that from my own personal experience and background, like police always means something really scary and really you shouldn't be dealing with for any even basic reasons. But when I came here to Ireland, I started working, I realized that there is something called like the integration and I think
So-
inclusive kind of
Officer integration
office, like particular department in the Gardaí, which focuses on dealing with these basic issues with racism and with, making more inclusive and safe communities. And I think like when I met them first time in one of the events I attended, I still had in my background like, oh, there is police, so it must be really scary. I didn't talk to them. But then when I gathered up like the courage to go and talk to them and to, speak about concerns of the community, I think that I realized like there are some friendly police and they could be actually a source of positive change in society and of supporting people who are really in need.
Yeah, very
Thank
interesting.
you.
Yeah. Tiernan and Sarah, I'm absolutely going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to apologise for it.
You're grand. I suppose in the last 10 years, it's been Marriage Equality and Gender Recognition Act were both in 2015. I think that changed a lot. And since then, more work being done around Children and Families Relationship Act, around LGBT families. There's still a lot of work to do there, but a lot has changed since marriage equality because of that. And it's doing all the kind of follow-up work around family rights, and broadening that to be more inclusive of LGBT families. I think there's been some great change in that area, which has been probably the biggest in terms of like legislation. I think those have been the biggest changes.
I suppose that legislation didn't happen without social change first, and campaigning and changing people's minds. So yeah, social movement, I guess.
Yeah,
Exactly. Like change doesn't happen by accident. I just happen to have a slide. I'll just read this slide. And we'll come back to the definition in a second, but change doesn't happen by accident. There can be catalysts, something that hurries it up, like the demise of the power of the church, the empowerment of women, your better education, better communication, globalization. In particular, Ireland joining the EU. Like it wasn't, you know, before 1973, women who used to work in the civil service had to leave their jobs when they got married. It wasn't out of the goodness of the government's heart that changed. That changed because we joined the EU, and the EU were saying, what? You know, change that. A lot of change has been brought about by globalization and by seeing how other things happen in other areas. And then because of things like membership of the EU, we're subject to change. Crisis can bring change. COVID brought a huge amount of change, and very, very quickly. And I think I certainly, I don't know whether it's my brain won't let me go back there, I'm not sure, but when it seems so long ago, if somebody told me COVID didn't actually happen, I'd nearly believe them. But it brought...
Can I say something? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, go on, Shungrit, yeah.
Yeah, based on the COVID you said, in terms of COVID, I noticed during the COVID period, before COVID, there was a lot of things done in the traditional method. People love to shop physically more. I know people still do that, but COVID brought the shift change in technology, that there's more embracement and adaptation of businesses going online, and then embracing different ways to operate in the workspace. And we could see things from different perspectives, not the normal ways, the norms that people have believed. And which actually made lots of improvements in our communities or societies today. And also in terms of the change, based on the definition of social change, there's one thing Cultural Migrant Center did that they're still doing in Louth and in Meath, which is research on issues affecting people in County Louth and Meath, and also looking at the possible solutions to those issues. And those research is involved with the community service providers, migrant leaders. It's actually being done locally at different spaces, involving those that face the issues and also making those people say the possible solutions, which in those meetings, there's lots of things getting done, and it's influencing lots of changes that I've been seeing. Though I know there's a lot that still needs to be done, but the research is an open thing, because there was a poster created out of it that they do the campaign in different places, and it still keep going, which is a very good one.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point. Like COVID made us set aside all our norms really quickly. Like within a week, we all had changed. We had all changed. So and it wasn't all good. Like some of it was good, you know, some of it was not good. A lot of it was not good. And I think the way we treated older people was horrendous. It was, you know, quite horrendous in lots of ways. But all of that aside, it's about the role of crisis. Crisis can bring change and bring it very quickly. I think you're dead right about research. Research can bring change. And I think we often we don't appreciate research enough. Like the research that you're doing in ICON is going to be powerful. The stuff that was done in Culture, that then you very creatively transferred into that poster campaign, research is so fun. Research can really bring change, because what research does is it brings the truth to the table that is backed up by evidence, so it becomes undeniable. And I think that undeniability of research is really, really important. But also it's important that research is done properly, because I've seen enough research in my day, usually done by those big, huge companies that, you know, haven't a clue. And I was just at another meeting with another one of them, haven't a clue. And you know, they come up with all this corporate stuff. It has to be real research. It has to be reflective of real people and real communities. Climate is going to bring social change. We really haven't seen it yet, because we really haven't felt the true impacts, but climate change is going to bring huge social change. But I think some of the key things about social change is it rarely happens by accident. It doesn't happen by accident. Sometimes, and it's not sometimes, actually, it's almost always externally influenced. Sometimes, as you said, Sarah, as a result of movements, as a result of a groundswell, as a result of one person, somebody somewhere saying, that's not right, and another person agreeing, actually, you know, that is not right. And the next thing, you've 10 people, and then you've 10,000, and then you have people coming home to vote. And the emotion that, well, I still feel emotional when I think back to that time and people coming home to vote. And I don't think in Irish society we'll ever touch into something as powerful as we touched into then. And I know we spoke about the recent referendums, and I don't think there's probably few, no, that's not true. There's probably a lot of people, but I would say if you ask the majority of people in Ireland, do they want to take that clause out of the Constitution about women's role in the home, which actually isn't as bad as people make it. It doesn't say that women have a role in the home, by the way, but that aside. But the alternative narrative, the alternative that was provided to us by the people in power, was something that we, the people who had the power on that particular day, decided to refuse. We decided no. In fact, I heard that on a few votes, people had said, no, go away and try harder, or something like that. But it is that change is as a result of groundswell. But what we need to make sure is the change then that is presented to us. So the groundswell is we want change. But when we're not presented with the change we want, this is why it's really important for people to be involved at all levels, because none of the civil society organisations were involved in the drafting of that alternative text for the Constitution. So people said they wanted change, but they actually said, well, we don't want that change. That's not what we want. Sometimes it's a spectrum. Sometimes change is big and visible and visceral, and you can see it, and there's celebrations. Sometimes they're smaller and less visible. And I think what some of you have described is smaller and less visible, but absolutely important. And legislative change has both a cause and an effect. It can be the cause of change, or the effect can be change. So, you know, the legislation can bring about change, or we need the legislation to change in order to bring about that change. Does that make sense to people? And being involved in social change is really, really important, because we will all have different definitions. I hope we won't, you know, but others have different definitions of social change. If you ask the far right what change they would like, what would they like? You know, if you ask the Countess, which is that organisation, whether they would like marriage equality, they would say absolutely not. But luckily, I think in this country, generally, we have enough people to say, yes, we want change. Does that make sense to people? Any comments? No? No?
I think
It was hard on Zoom.
There has been a lot of change in Ireland over the years, like as Tiernan and with the marriage, the divorce, the abortion. I mean, you think in the 80s, like late 70s, 80s, that wouldn't have even came into a thought in anyone's head that Ireland would have progressed so much for such a small country. I think there has been major changes in Ireland over the past 40, 50 years. It has, and a lot of it for the good. So I do think we are adaptable to change. We don't, and the voice of the people gets heard.
Yeah.
Through referendums, like that, we have a voice. And who'd ever thought abortion would have moved to this country? Same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
Children of same-sex couples, and 30 years ago, no. But when them referendums, a majority.
Yeah.
So was everybody in the country had more or less the same views.
Yeah.
That they weren't trying to hold back. They want us to be a progressive country.
Yeah.
So you can't see a major change.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, you know, within community, like I think sometimes we think of, oh, marriage equality, brilliant change, and we forget about the groundswell of civil society pushing for that change. And not just pushing for that change, but like putting their backs to the wheel, getting out there, you know, and that's the importance of, like, slight difference between that and community work, but it's all the same. Like if you look at another, if for undocumented migrants, an enormous change came about as a result of community work that the Migrants' Rights Centre Ireland did, that led into campaigning work. So they started, and this is the way they work, one-to-one work with migrants who are in precarious situations, community work, moving into community work with groups of people, and then campaigning for change, such as the change for undocumented workers. So these types of things are very, very linked, and community work is very linked to these types of change. And when we talk about change within community work, the way we look at it is in the context of community work, social change refers to changes in policy, law, structures and institutions, attitudes and behaviour, societal ideologies that are required for a just and equal society to prevail. So it's all of these things. It's policy, it's law, it's our own attitudes, it's other people's attitudes, because attitudes bring change. Change in attitudes brings a change in law a lot of the time. Societal ideologies, you know, the way we believe, behaviours. And community work is a developmental process involving incremental change, and social change itself is often incremental. So change can be big, it can be big, it can be sudden, it can be great, you know, we're having a party and it's brilliant, but it can also be incremental. And it can be small, it can be the small things, and we can't, you know, we can't not celebrate that, because community work is slow. So, you know, you might have a goal. That goal might never be realized. A goal of an anti-racist society might never be realized, but you can make incremental changes along the way. So progress, milestones, absolutely key in community work. Anybody want to jump in?
I was just thinking about how around like incremental change and the small changes kind of adding up. And I think also something I've been thinking about is changes, and it isn't necessarily linear either. Like we face a lot of setbacks and periods of regression sometimes. So almost in those moments.
Look where you're sitting.
Yeah.
In a resource hub that you used to have, then didn't have, now have again.
Yeah, exactly. We did have an LGBT resource centre and lost it, and had a period of 3 years where there was no physical space for the community. And now we have one again, which is great. But I think in those times of regression or pushback, that's like when it's really hard not to almost like give up sometimes, or it's like in those times it's important to almost step back and view a bigger picture and look at like, well, actually, how far have we come in the last 50 years versus maybe what's happened in the last like 5 months or 5 years, because those may have been times of actually where it gets harder. I had a conversation with my uncle. This is like very random story, but I think I was struggling with the job and with how I was getting exhausted, feeling like we were just constantly pushing and pushing and pushing and getting nowhere. And actually we were pushing and pushing and getting more no's and actually regressing in some ways, and things were getting harder in some ways. And I was having a conversation with him, and he's gay as well, and he's 70 this year. And we were talking about it, and he kind of turned around to me and he was like, listen, I've been around and out for, you know, almost 60 years. And it's really important that, you know, there's going to be times where it gets worse, and it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. He was like, I lived through Thatcher, and, you know, it got really bad there for a while, but it always gets better again. And it was so like reassuring to hear it from someone else. It's been around for longer, and I was like, oh, that I needed to hear that. So it kind of gave me hope again for like when in times of pushback and where there's resistance, it doesn't mean it's forever.
You know, a really good random story, very, very descriptive random story. Yeah, go with the random. I think you're dead right. It's sometimes it's one step forward, 2 steps back. Sometimes it's, you know, it's 1 step forward, half a step back. Sometimes it's and 6 steps back. And that's why it's important in community work to surround yourself by other community workers who know that. You know, so important for a mock to be involved with the Go With Traveller movement. They'll tell you about 1 step forward, 6 steps back, and then maybe 10 steps forward because something changes. Like, we wouldn't be here today if there wasn't a change in attitude that came around as a result of a new party in government. You know, things change, and you have to, there are Neil Crowley, I don't know if people know Neil Crowley, he used to be the head of the Equality Authority. He always talks about moments, and that you have to hang on to moments, and you have to make the most of moments. And I think your uncle is dead right. My brother was gay. He had to move to London. He couldn't be gay where we lived. And now I've two daughters, a niece, nephew. We all sit around talking about it. You know, that's change. Having a conversation about sexuality like it's only, oh Jesus Christ, can't do that is change. But I think you're right. You can get down because you think, oh my God, you know, Galway City Council, and he's into be. Oh, this is recorded. There are lots of reasons. So it's important to surround ourselves with ourselves, which is why networking opportunities are really, really important. And it's why we have reflection built into the community work program. So every 2 months, we take an hour and a half out, and we just go, oh, geez, what are we doing? And that type of reflection is really important, both within organizations, but outside organizations with other community workers as well. Yeah. Anybody else on that? Sheree, you're very welcome. We have it recorded, bad language and all, so you can look back on it when you get a chance. Just going to go on a small little bit here. So, okay. So I'm going to start bringing it back to community work. If I can find my slide, which is not going in the sequence I thought they would be going in today. Can you see that one? I want you for a second, just before we even, where within our own community development projects, within our own community, can we see ourselves reflected in our community development projects, in the projects that you're all associated with in one way or another? Some of you are working there, some of you are, you know, working on an unpaid capacity, some of you are whatever way you're associated with it. Can you see yourself reflected in the projects?
Can I ask, do you mean is it affecting you, or
No,
Okay, so
Do you know the way
how
they
do-
say you can't be it if you can't see it? Can you see yourselves? Amina, are you going to say something?
Yes, I was gonna say something. So yeah, I mean, I think I can see myself to a certain extent, and maybe in particular areas more than others. The way I could explain it is that first of all, when I came to Ireland, and I was putting in my mind like this Christian country, and then I mean, it's gonna be very hard probably to connect with people from Muslim communities and Arab communities. And I was surprised by the amount of work that has been done by a lot of NGOs in order to, include and also diversify the voices of Muslim community here. Even before I came and before there were already settled communities who did a lot of work in order to fight for their rights. And I think that was really impressive. But then again, I would always say there is not enough amount of fighting for your rights anyway, because there is still poverty, there is still housing crisis, there is a lot of in terms of profiling, in terms of employment and things like that that are still happening. And I think people should, instead of focusing on their small issues in their own lives, come more together and have a stronger voice.
Yeah. But
Those
can
kind
you
of
see
issues.
yourself in the Amal Muslim Women's Association, in your community development project? Can you see yourself reflected? Can you see?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I haven't there been long, but I think so. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see yourself reflected within Kultur?
Within what?
Kultur, it's Ping. I was just saying, can Ping see herself reflected in Kultur?
Yeah, because Couture work close with immigrants, and
Yes.
I think and since my involvement, I can say the changes and the things, and the awareness, the work they've done has really raised the immigrants, their awareness of their right and their entitlement. And I think I feel quite strong with that. And
Yeah.
also certainly, the culture changes and everything that, but they all done through all the community activities and events they organize and
Yeah.
the training sessions. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely critical, because sometimes people don't see themselves reflected in society, but they do see themselves reflected in fact, it's critical that they see themselves reflected in the community development projects with which they are associated. So could you imagine, for example, Traveller project with absolutely no travellers involved? No. So that's what community development does. It creates structures within which people see themselves reflected. So imagine if there was nobody from inner city Dublin involved in ICON. It just doesn't make sense not to have people reflected within community development structures. So we would say things like, can you see, can you see yourself reflected in the community development projects? Can you relate to those who are experiencing challenges and disadvantages? Our meeting structures, people who make decisions, are they reflective of the communities they're coming from? So it's about making sure that there is a critical mass of people at every level of the project that are reflective or representative of the communities with which the project is working. It doesn't need to be everybody, because there are allies that can often be useful. So you would, for example, often have in traveller projects, you would have non-traveller people, but they would be allies of the traveller community and they might have a particular role. And what that does then is it builds up trust in the decisions that are being made. Like, I know I got an email from Fiona, because I think you're looking for a new person on the board, Tiernan and Sarah, and she was saying, we're looking for somebody good at figures, they don't have to be gay. Like, that's a brilliant thing to say. It's an absolutely brilliant thing to say. And it's important to know that there are allies out there, but it's absolutely critical in this day and age, because it didn't always start off like that. But in this day and age, if it's a community development project for Muslim women, you have to see Muslim women at all levels of the project. If it's a traveller project, you have to see travellers at all levels of the project. It's not about other people speaking on behalf of the community. It's about supporting the community to be able to speak on behalf of themselves. And that means sharing power. You know, that does mean sharing power and communities themselves making informed choices. And that's what community development strives to do. So the projects, the organizations, the sort of physical manifestations of the communities, if you like, they have to be reflective of the communities and community development. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Yeah. Any comments?
Yes, I agree with that. And particularly with Jakarta, like every year, and last year before, this year we have the poster campaign, but last year when they before the poster was that, so the circle and there was that we first invited all the stakeholders as well as the community, the immigrants and groups from different areas. We had kind of a roundtable and meeting. So to patch up, the immigrants, their needs, and also invited the stakeholders to meet together to introduce their service. So doing this kind of, the match. And then, so it's based on this kind of process, and the posters have been developed. Yeah. And then this year, yeah. And then there was the second round again. So we did the same process. So stakeholders and all the immigrants groups meet together again. So there was the needs, and it's kind of like a new requirements and the new services, anything. And so just into the match, or they can direct us where they go to, like Ukraine groups and like the African groups. So and the mostly local Muslim groups. And they all have a different, as myself, I was during this process, I get to know others, say, Women's Day that time, and we met with Muslim groups, and they kind of like introduced about the Ramadan, and we got the chance to ask the questions and how they're dealing with the fasting, and then their children, how they cope with that. So we're getting, the opportunity to understand each other's better, because that's the only things you kind of like break down the barriers. If you don't know it, and it's all separate, so it's never gets integration, and never get this kind of like community together, because it's always barriers there. I think that through this process, these kinds of meetings and discussions, and Jakarta 2 weeks ago also organized a community awareness day. So invited the guards and the local and education board, so different areas, and then, it's provided the opportunities, and they say what services is available, and then they would know. Say I had the colleagues that never know, they they were born and bred in Ireland, and they never need to dealing with immigration office.
Yeah.
Because there was no need to.
Yeah.
And also in Dundalk, immigration office is located in the same building in the guard station. So to them, that's just a guard station. And everybody, they go to guard station, that's for whatever, your passport, your driving license, whatever, the normal business. And they don't really say why the immigrants have to go to the immigration. And they don't understand that, right? They have the payments has been involved. I understand that it's all kind of like new to them. And then they say, okay, that's the Irish government provided us that. They don't even know. But to us, to the immigrants, we come to the host country, and a lot of things are new to us. So how do you get it? I think, Jakarta provided a good opportunity for both sides work together, and, for better community. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I do think, the way what you're describing there in terms of some of the work that Culture is doing, I would say that it underpins most social change, and that I kind of refer to it as hearts and minds. So you're giving the evidence, you're giving the alternative, but really it's it's capturing people's hearts is going to make the change. And capturing people's hearts is it's often about creativity. So whether it's the poster campaign, whether it's the home to vote campaign, you know, that stuff that makes you kind of shivery, that's the hearts bit. But you also have to do the minds bit, which is the research. It's showing people how it's better. If you ever listen to a lot of the media, then some media will, you know, it'll lead off with these are the figures, these are the stats, but then they'll have somebody in the situation giving a kind of a bit of a brief description about how these figures affect my life. It's hearts and minds, and we always need to keep that in our heads when we're looking for social change. It is about presenting the evidence, but it's also about changing the hearts, because it's the hearts that will bring it with you. And I do think that a lot of social change is underpinned by slog, the hard work, you know, and we don't get an awful lot of the big moments, but we get a lot of the slog. So we just have to understand that it is connected, that what we're doing today, like filling out the application form to blah, 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 are doing the second of 5 reports that you have to do to get your funding. That's the slog. But we have to remember that the change bit is built on that slog. Okay, I'm just going to, before we finish up, bring it back to community work a little bit, which is probably, you're probably thinking that might be a good idea, Anne. So bringing it back to, again, the same slide we've been using throughout. Is it beginning to make a little bit more sense to people when we talk about community work being a task and a process, achieving social change, achieving equality, social justice, human rights, but in a way that is particular to community work? So it's the process is particular. It's the opening up spaces for participation. It's making sure that the projects are reflective of the communities that they're working with. It's about empowerment. It's about collective decision making in a structured and coordinated way. Can I just ask, when we first started looking at that, and now that you're looking at it, is it beginning to make a little bit more sense? Is it please say yes. Is it beginning to describe what we're all involved in a little bit more for people?
Yes, for me, in any way it is. I can see, like you're saying, I didn't understand the question when you said, does it reflect me on the community work? But now I understand what you mean, the bigger picture. So yeah, I feel very involved in the volunteer group I'm in. And I can see that we're making a change. It might be slow, but we're making a change. And yeah, so for me, it is definitely.
For me, it's about at the beginning when we were talking about the task and process, all what was in my mind is about the tasks. What should we do? 1, 2, 3, 4. But now, after more explanation, I'm all about the process more, is how to do it and how to include people in it. And even if it's only one task and you spend the whole year doing this, but the process is done correctly, then the outcome will be better than doing multiple tasks without looking at a very, very accurate process.
Really well said. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, here
Jump
it has been probably mentioned at some point, but I think we should all remember that it's not about what we want to do to the community, but more like what the community themselves need or want to be done for them, and more like how to be more people driven, like just providing the tool for them to create the change. Like we don't have to expect ourselves to be the ones who create this whole picture. And it shouldn't be like time limited, like in 6 months or in 1 year, because this is something that will definitely take time to establish and to move forward and create real impact.
Yeah, yeah. And I want yourself, Anira, to look at where Tiernan and Sarah are, because that's our conversation yesterday about a hub for Muslim women. they're just those types of spaces are so important. And I know Icon, you are really short of space, but at least you have a space. Spaces in communities are very, very important. Yeah, we'll all be looking forward to the opening of Teach Solas. Okay, so I'm just going to leave you with these two then. Okay, so I think what we've been engaging in over the last while is about looking at thoughtful action. When we do the analysis, so there's actionless thought and thoughtless action. And what we're looking for is thoughtful action, thought out action. Actionless thought is when we do all the analysis, but we don't actually do anything about it. We know, everybody knows people like that. They can talk and talk and talk, but do they actually do anything? And thoughtless action. And thoughtless action is just, not taking the time to do the thinking, not taking the time to do the needs analysis or the community profile or the strategic plan. What you can end up doing then is to have that thoughtless action. What we're striving for is thoughtful action. And part of that is critical education. Now, critical education is people sitting around in a room. It doesn't have to be formal education. This is critical education for all of us. It's about discussing the issues, breaking the issues down, not taking things at face value, not accepting poverty. Take a very big example, asking, why does poverty exist? Why is it that way? And then looking at raising consciousness, root causes versus symptoms. What's actually a symptom and what's a root cause? Recognize the inequality and power of a dominant ideology, a dominant narrative, and challenging that dominant narrative. And then it's about empowering people into collective action and influencing society, influencing structural change from a grassroots approach. And that is what community work is striving to do. And I am just going to leave you, this is one of my favorite cartoons ever. If it's anything, community development is an antidote or a challenge to representative democracy. So somebody comes along every few years and they say, vote for me, sure, and I'll speak for you. Community work is about saying, well, how about creating the conditions for us to be able to speak for ourselves? Do you like that cartoon? Yeah. And you can even see within PowerPoint presentations, like words will only get you so far. You have to have images. People, I suppose, responds to images, and images stay with people. So remember that in the whole Hearts and Minds campaigns of social change, images stay with people much more than words do. Okay, any last questions or comments? Or do a quick check-in? Okay, we'll just go around the screen then and do a really quick check-in. I'm going to attempt to do it backwards this time. Shireen, I know you were late. Don't worry about it. Life happens. How are you feeling after what bit of the session you did get? Are you there?
Do you mean Shim?
Sorry, I'm here. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm really sorry I was late. I can't really say I got a lot right now because I'm still even distracted trying to sort stuff out. But for the previous two sessions, it was absolutely lovely. Enough information, and I was even listening to the to Anya. I like the point that you brought out as well, and I like the last cartoon that you put up, Anne. Right.
Yep.
I like the last. Sorry, I'm preoccupied as
You're
well.
okay.
So please,
You're a bit distracted today. Don't worry.
right.
And it will be recorded.
So
Shireen,
I like the cartoon that you brought up as well. That says, "No, vote for me. What I can do, and I'll be your voice." I like the counterpart of it. The answer that it gives.
Yeah.
I like that more than the vote for me bit, because at least if we know what we can do, what the community wants, then you can stand up and talk for us. But if you don't know, then we're just voting for you to just sit there and do absolutely nothing. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
very important for us to have the community workers to go out and see what the community wants. It's not
Yeah.
what you can do for it, because maybe what we go out and think that we can do for the community is not necessarily what the community is looking for.
Exactly.
Right. So we need to change our strategy a bit and go out, do a little research to see, you know what, we have different ethnic groups here. What is it that you want us to do for you? What can we advocate for you? You know, what would you like us to do? And with those answers, then we can come back and say, you know what, this is what the community want. Let's work on it from
Yeah.
there.
And I would even say maybe not change the language slightly, not for you, but with you. You know, I think that you know, we're
Exactly.
starting to do it with you. And that's why we talk about in community work, we don't talk about clients or service users, we talk about participants. So language is key. Okay, thanks, Julie, for that. Archie,
Thank
how are you
you.
feeling after
Hi,
today?
guys.
Any takeaways, Archie, from today's session? You there? Okay, I'll move on. Neera, how are you feeling after today's session?
I feel more clear and more focus on what should we do from today. Yeah.
Great, well done. Anne-Marie and then Amina. How are you feeling after today, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, actually, I can see as the weeks are, you know, we're in our third week now, and I can see even from going back over my notes what we're aiming for. Do you know what I mean? Where I did say the first week I didn't really know what this was about. I can see that we're all looking for the change and we're going for the community, and I get loads out of it, really.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well done. Thank you. Amina and then Sinead.
Yeah, so I would like to really thank you and everyone for the discussion. I think it was really insightful, and also, I mean, like, it makes it clear how we would start on this community development, first steps of it. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well done. Sinead and then Joyce.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of giving me more of a clearer insight of what should be happening, because like I'm only new to Icon myself. I'm only there a couple of months. But yeah, like we even had the meeting last night, and it was kind of, I discussed that from doing this course as well. It's given me more of a passion to continue to do the community development. So yeah.
Well done. Joyce and then Siún Grace.
Yeah, I think it's been very informative, listening to all the different groups and where everybody's working. Even in our own group, like the subgroups that have came out of Icon, all from just small amounts of mainly women from getting together and just having a voice.
Yeah, well done. Yeah. Siún Grace and then Tiernan and Sarah. So Siún Grace first.
Hi everyone. So basically the section was okay and the previous one was good as well. And in terms of the social change, the shift and change for people, for the community, and adapting to the current system we are now, and also trying to implement change in our communities.
Yep, very good. Thank you. And last but not least, oh, yeah. Who wants to go first, Tiernan or Sarah?
I'll go first. It was really interesting, and I'm excited to maybe get the recordings of the previous sessions off you, if that's okay, and catch up, because I kind of jumped in midway. But yeah, great, and thank you.
Great, good to have
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I'm thinking mostly about I suppose the participation, and we have a really great kind of community that is engaged with us, and I suppose it's moving into that community development approach, and how do we empower them and kind of tap into that engagement that we have with the community, I suppose, for more collective change. So I'm in my head, I'm just like, right, and how do we do that now? Kind of a thing. So it's good though, it's really great food for thought.
Yeah. And I think that ping is gone. She said she did say she had to leave early, but can I just say that you're going to learn way more from the discussion bits than you're going to learn from anything else. So I would encourage people to be, be as bold. Don't be waiting. I would, if we were in a room, I'd be encouraging you to all talk over each other. I know it's really hard on Zoom, but I would encourage you, and don't ever apologize for, for having something to say, or, the little anecdotes that really say an awful lot. So I'm learning absolutely loads, and I really want to thank you. I'm really enjoying the sessions myself, and looking forward to next week. So we will see, well, as many of you as possible, this time 11 o'clock next Thursday for the last session. Yeah. In the meantime, have a lovely week, everybody, a lovely weekend, and hope the weather improves. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Anne.